snowing the other evening, so when we were all parked in the garage, we got talking to each other. News had gone round that Mr. Rumbelow, the manager, was thinking about selling one of us off. Naturally, we were all alarmed. How could he run a garage without even one of us? Weren't we all important? "It won't be me," Snoopy Sneer said smugly. "I'm the only really flashy car around here. All the young men like me to impress their girlfriends, and I'm the only one who can get up speed. Whereas Mr. McIntosh likes me because I don't get up speed," I had to say. "So Mr. Rumbelow won't be selling me." "I know I haven't been here long." Japonica blushed and spoke quietly. "And I know I've had one or two excitements since I arrived, but customers do seem to like me, and I have had some important occasions to attend, so I don't think he'll get rid of me." "And it won't be me," laughed Blunderbuss. "I know I'm in trouble more often than not, but I do bring custom to the garage. What other garage owns a magnificent specimen like me with my brass horns and my leather seats and comfort?" The motorbikes laughed. "Life would certainly be more peaceful without you," they said. "That may be true," said Fiona, "but think of your petrol consumption. About 12 miles to the gallon in these days. Minuet and I are cheap to run and easy to park. You take up the space of 2 cars when you park." Blunderbuss ignored Fiona's remark, but muttered to the motorbike something about quality and workmanship. A quiet voice from the background chipped in. It was Rattlewagon, the breakdown truck. "And of course, I'm no beauty. I've not got Snoopy's sleek lines or Blunderbuss's luxury leather, but I'd like to know who comes and tows you all home when you break down." All the cars grinned. "Oh, Rattlewagon, you don't count. You're only the breakdown truck. We're talking about real cars and what appeals to customers and what's good for the garage." Just then Mr. Rumbelow came in from outside, snow cutting his boots. "Hey, Bert, just had a call from up Moorside Farm. Their car's packed up and Mrs. Ferguson's baby's on the way. They want a car to get her into the maternity hospital before they get snowed in." "Which one shall we send?" asked Bert. "I've got Fandango's gearbox in pieces here, so he's no good."
Not quite sure. Snoopy won't do. He's too low. He'll get stuck in the snow up on those farm tracks. Fiona may not have enough weight. I think Japonica will be the best one, and she'll be nice and comfortable for Mrs. Ferguson,"
said Mr. Rumbelow. Japonica was delighted to be chosen, especially after the talk they'd all been having. She'd show Mr. Rumbelow that she was too good to lose. In the town, salt had been laid, and the snow had started to melt. And then the freeze had set in. Everywhere was icy. Japonica saw a double-decker bus skid on a zebra crossing when a man suddenly dashed across, but mostly drivers were taking care. "We got a tricky job," said the driver to Japonica as they passed the gasworks. "We must get there before the farm is snowed up." Once they left the main roads, the going was not so good. Snow lay thick on the ground, and few cars had passed that way. But Japonica laughed confidently when she saw an abandoned car by the side of the road. She felt she was doing quite well, and she was determined to reach Mrs. Ferguson safely. It was on one of the steeper lanes that the trouble began. Snow had begun to fall again. Soon Japonica could hardly see where she was going. Her wheels began to lose their grip, but she managed to slither on. Then the worst possible thing happened. A farmer on a tractor suddenly swung out of a field in front of them. Japonica had to stop. But could she get started again? She couldn't. Her wheels spun round and round. Meanwhile, the tractor, not realizing what it had done, was halfway up the hill. Her wheels just could not get a grip, even with a sack slid under them by the driver. "I'll have to give up," she said. "I just can't make it." Poor Japonica. She was so disappointed. A tear rolled down her face. And that soon turned into an icicle. Her driver backed her into the hedge. "I'll have to find a farm or a house somewhere to phone for help," he said. Buttoning his coat up tightly round his neck, he struggled through the snow. He was lucky to find a cottage not far away. Fortunately, the old man who lived there had a phone and welcomed him in. "You can phone from here," he said. The snow fell thicker and thicker. Soon all that could be seen of Japonica was a gentle bump by the hedge. At the other end of the phone, Mr. Rumbelow was alarmed at the news. "I'll have to send Rattlewagon," he said. "I know he's not comfortable, but as far as I can see, he's the only one that will get through. We can't risk any more mishaps. He can pick you and Japonica up on the way back." Bert flung in a few tartan car rugs to make Mrs. Ferguson comfortable, and Mr. Rumbelow gave him a flask of coffee. "I'll drive Rattlewagon myself," said Bert. "Time's short, and I know the route well. Rattlewagon's the only one with a four-wheel drive. He should be able to get through." "Where should we be without Rattlewagon?" said Mr. Rumbelow. "I've heard of the stork bringing the baby, but never the crane," cracked Snoopy, laughing at his own joke. The rest of us were almost too stunned to talk. "Fancy Rattlewagon being chosen," we murmured to each other. Bert and Rattlewagon made good progress. Rattlewagon was very happy and sang as he battled through the snow. Mr. Rumbelow had chosen him. He was important after all. After they had left the main road and joined the lanes, Rattlewagon noticed a familiar-looking shape by a hedge. "I think that must be poor Japonica," he said to himself. "She must be feeling miserable." Japonica heard them coming and was glad she was almost completely covered in snow. At last they reached the track leading up to Moorside Farm. Carefully, Rattlewagon eased himself along. He put all his concentration into that last 100 yards. And suddenly they were there. All the lights in the farm were on. Mr. Ferguson was shoveling the garden path clear for his wife. Mrs. Ferguson looked anxiously from behind a curtain. The farmer's face fell when he saw Rattlewagon. "I thought we ordered a comfortable car," he grumbled. "Not a breakdown truck. My wife's about to have a baby. How can she travel in that?" Bert jumped out and explained everything to Mr. Ferguson. "We'll take great care of your wife," he promised, "and make her as comfortable as possible. I've got rugs here and hot coffee. This kind of night, a truck like this is the best thing." Mr. Ferguson calmed down a bit and went in to get his wife. Soon she emerged from the house, clutching blankets and hugging a hot water bottle. Mr. Ferguson helped her into Rattlewagon's cab and waved goodbye. "Good old Rattlewagon," she said. "He's better than a tractor. I thought it might even come to that." And she laughed. "It's not such a stylish car as I'd imagined, but as long as we get there on time, that's all I'm worried about," she said. The journey downhill to the town was much easier, though the corners were tricky, and Rattlewagon tried as hard as he could not to rattle too much. He knew Mrs. Ferguson must be treated carefully. Soon the familiar landmarks loomed out of the snow, the gasworks, the school, and at last the hospital. Mrs. Ferguson was soon enveloped in the warmth of the hospital. "We'll soon make you comfortable in a warm bed, that's what you need," her nurse said to her. "That's just what I'd like," thought Bert, "but we've got more work to do yet." He and Rattlewagon set out to pick up Japonica's driver who'd been sheltering in the cottage. Together they dug Japonica out, and Rattlewagon lowered the crane and lifted her clear. "I feel so ashamed," murmured Japonica, but Bert tried to cheer her up. "You did your best," he said. "Rattlewagon did his bit too. You couldn't help it." Rattlewagon chipped in. "We're all made differently. We can't all do the same jobs. I can do jobs that you can't do, and you can do jobs that I can't do." Japonica tried to smile. When they got back to Top Gear Motors, there had been a phone call from the hospital. They had only just got there on time, and it was a boy. "They ought to christen him Rattlewagon," said Japonica. "But I suppose that's not a very good name for a baby." When we'd all settled down for the night, none of us said very much. We were all thinking again about who was needed most in the garage, and for the first time realizing that, well, can you guess?